What's happening, hobby people? My name is Jacob from the Dry Paint Pot, and today I'm going to teach you how to paint a skink for your Seraphon army. So stick around. So before we get things going, you probably have a very big question. What happened to my beard? So a few days ago, I was almost at 900 followers on Instagram. I was only 17 away, and I thought it would be fun to do a little challenge. I said, if I could hit 900 followers, then I will shave my beard. And I didn't expect it, but everyone kicked in and started sharing that all over, and within just a few days, I had 900 like that. So thank you all so very much for all of your support. And if you want to see how much this all means to me, I made a thank you video / beard shave video. So if you want to check that out, I'll link it up top. And I also want you to know that I'm not going over how to paint skink skin today. I'm specifically going to focus on how to paint the crest, the scales, the jewelry, the weapons, the eye, the mouth, and the nails. So if you haven't seen the first video, I'll also link it up top as well. Now, there's really nothing else to go over, so let's get things started. So the very first thing that we're going to paint today are these scales. Now, you do not have to paint them white. That's the color that I like to paint them, but you can choose any color that you'd like. Just follow these same steps and you'll be able to get a really good result. So the very first thing that we're going to do is get a darker color. Now, I like to use Celestra Gray as a base for the white highlights. So you're going to want to go ahead and just get it nice and thin down to like the consistency of a skim milk, and just add some on your brush a little bit. You don't want to load it up too much, and just start with getting all of these scales. Now take your time and be sure to get every single little scale. You don't want to miss one. You should now have a nice base coat all set. And we next want to wash that area with some Nuln Oil. So go ahead and pop some open, and without thinning it, go ahead and just wash over all the areas that you just painted. Now we don't want to flood the area, and we don't want to really worry about any of the scales that are over on the leg because they're just surrounded by skin, but really just wash the area that's all bunched up at the top here. While you do this, try to get your wash to settle in the recesses between each scale. The black recesses create a massive contrast and look really nice once this is all done. Now before you move on to finishing the scales, you want to give the wash plenty of time to dry. So I suggest moving on to a different part of the model, start working on that, and come back to the scales once they're fully dry. What I'm going to move on to next is the crest, and we're going to start with painting that corn red. Just like everything else we're painting today, 2 thin coats should be sufficient, so just be sure to not get any of this red on the blue skin that you just painted. Now let me remind you that you don't have to paint the crest red. I mean, you really don't have to paint anything on this model the way that I'm doing it. These are just the colors that I like my skinks to be. And you can switch up these colors for any other color that you'd like. Just be sure to use the same techniques if you want to get the same result. Okay, so now the crest of the skink should be complete. And while we wait for that to dry, we're going to do some more multitasking and jump right back to these scales and begin putting down the same color that you used for the base. So for me, that is going to be Celestra Gray. So I'm just going to get some of that Celestra Gray onto my brush. And without going over the entire scale, I just want to put down a little more of that color. You see, the wash really mutes the base color, so you want to start bringing that up if you're going to add some highlights, which we will soon with some white scar. Now that our base color is back, we next want to add some highlights, and I'm going to use some white scar. So what I'm going to do is add just a little bit of white scar to the Celestra Gray, and I'm going to just highlight the areas where the light catches. And if you don't know where those areas are, all you need to do is take your model, hold it under a lamp, and see wherever the light reflects. Those are the areas that you want to go over with a very thin layer of your mixed colors. And I'm just going to work at the top, just start getting that highlight down. Our scales are now done and we can move on to the crest. So next, you want to take that Nuln Oil again and give that crest a good wash. But when we wash the crest this time, we want to make sure that we don't allow too much to pool here. Now, if you notice that you have any major pooling going on, go ahead and remove some wash from your brush and just dab away at those spots. Your brush should soak up the wash and you won't have any weird drying stains. Like so. Now, while we're waiting for that to dry, there are two groups of people out there. Those who paint their skink eyes yellow and those who go for white. I mean, I've seen other people paint them black, but it's not as common. I personally like the eyes to be white, but again, you can do them whatever color you'd like. So if you want to paint them white, we want to start with some Corax white, give a good base coat, and then we're going to follow up with the highlight of white scar. So make sure you're using a brush that has a decently fine tip on there, and just start throwing down your base coat. Now, I really liked this Hobby Hotspots medium utility brush, mostly because of the tip. It had a very fine tip, but that's starting to split. So I'm going to set this aside for a minute and do the eyes with a smaller brush. This is their small precision brush. So we'll see how it works out. At least it'll have a better tip. Now, since this is not a sponsored video and I'm just being honest, this is not my favorite brush. I noticed that the tip on it is nowhere near as good as the tip was on the medium brush. I think it's because this had more bristles, so I was able to be more put together and defined, since this has so little bristles, they're tending to spread really fast, so I'm not able to really give a good coat with it. So it's not my favorite brush, but I think it'll do for right now. Now that the crest is dry, we want to add the base color back down. So we're going to start with corn red, and we're going to avoid any of these recesses right in here. We want to leave the creases darker than any other part of the crest. So you want to take the base color and run it from here all the way to the top and do the same all the way along the crest. Now that our base of corn red is down, we want to start highlighting with a mixture of corn red and Evil Sun Scarlet. So just take your paint, get a nice fine tip brush, and instead of starting all the way in the front, we want to start just a little further back and just do the same exact thing that you just did. Now, every time that we lighten up this blend, we want to start highlighting further back. And keep doing that over and over again until you have it as bright as you'd like. Now, I know this episode is probably going to drive you crazy, but I'm going to be jumping back and forth throughout this entire model. So to save a little bit of time, while I wait for the next layer to dry, I throw a little bit of Nuln Oil on my brush, and I want to go ahead and put that right onto the eye. And let the Nuln Oil seep into all the spaces around the lid, just like so. Do the same to both sides and let that thoroughly dry while you finish up the crest. The best part about this step is if you got any of the white onto the lid, this Nuln Oil will cover that up and you won't even notice the mistake. Once you found a good place to stop with the crest, you can now jump back to the eyes and put down another layer of the base coat. As you can tell, we're doing that a lot with this model, but before you start highlighting something, it's always better to bring the color back up to the base coat because a wash or a glaze will always change the color in some sort of way. So now for the pupil, this is the tricky part. Because if you mess it up, it's going to be a little hard to cover back up, and you don't want to throw too many layers down to keep covering up your mistakes. So what you want to do is get your brush with the finest point, throw a little bit of Abaddon black on there, whatever black paint you use, and go ahead and practice drawing just straight lines. Instead of doing a circular pupil, I like to just do a sort of lined pupil, and you're going to want to do that right down the center of the eye. With the pupils complete, we can now move on to the weapons and jewelry. Now, there is no correct way to paint the weapons or jewelry on a skink. There really isn't any correct way to paint these things. But what I like to do is paint the weapons black and the necklace black, and then do all the accents in gold. So for instance, this part of the weapon is going to be black, whereas the trim and the spikes are going to be either gold or silver. And the necklace here, the chain or the rope, is going to be black, and then all of the bits on there are going to be gold or silver. So get some Abaddon black onto your brush and begin painting. With the base coat down on the weapon, I encourage you to add some extreme highlights along any of the sharp edges just to really make it pop. Now for all the metal bits, you can either do non-metallic metal or you can use whatever metallic paint you'd like. Now if you know me, I enjoy using Vallejo's alcohol-based metallics, specifically the old gold. Now this gold is a lot warmer than the other gold, and it gives it just an older feel. I mean, it's old gold, what do you expect? And this stuff is a little tricky to use, so before you use it, if you're going to use it, be sure to check out the video that I made a while back on how to use alcohol-based metallics. It'll definitely help you out. Now, a word of advice, if you are going to use the Vallejo alcohol-based metallics, I suggest figuring out every area that you're going to cover with that color before you start, because this stuff tends to settle and you don't want to have to keep mixing it over and over and over again. It starts to become a lot. So just plan out where you want all of your gold to be, for example, and just knock all those out before you move on to the next color. Whew, that took forever, but now all of the metal is complete on the model, and we can now move on to the final two steps, the mouth and the hooves or toes, claws, I don't know, whatever the Seraphon call these. So the first thing that we're going to do is paint the teeth. So to start with that, we are going to put some Corax white on our brush, and we're pretty much going to do the same thing that we did with our scales. Corax white, a wash of Nuln Oil, and then a highlight of some white scar. And just do that with the teeth, and then we'll move on to the outer part of the mouth right here and the tongue. While we wait for the teeth to dry, I'm now going to move on to the nails. And I feel like I've said this 100 times, but you can paint them whatever color you'd like, but the color that I like to use is black. So first start with a base coat of black, and then just put a small highlight where the light catches on the nail with some either Celestia gray or whatever gray that you have. And by the time we're done with this, the teeth should be completely dry and ready for the wash. Now all that we have left to do is paint the tongue and the outer parts of the mouth. And to do this, all you need is some pink paint. I use Pink Horror by Citadel, but any pink will do. So just paint those areas and then just finish them off with a wash of Nuln Oil and we'll be all set. Alright, so today we're looking at the Hobby Hotspots Premium Dry Brush. Now, first impressions, this again feels like a nice quality brush. I like the last one and I like this one. The wood is pretty solid and everything is sealed up. I don't think it's going to bloat like the cheaper brushes that I have. And what I really like about this brush is the amount of bristles. You know, I've been using makeup brushes lately for a lot of my dry brushing, and the one that I've been using has very little bristles. And it's also a lot more firm, whereas this one is much softer. So I'm not sure what that's going to do for the dry brushing, but there's no better way to find out than giving it a shot. So today I'm going to test this dry brush out on this Skink base. If you want to know how I make these lava bases, I did a video on it ages ago. I mean, honestly, it's a pretty bad video. It was one of my very first ones. I think it was my second video that I ever made. So if you want to know how I make these bases, be sure to check that video out because I'll link it up top. But without further ado, let's get dry brushing. Wow, this is really nice. I wasn't gonna say anything while I was doing this dry brushing. I was just gonna add some audio in at the end, but I have to say the soft bristles and having so many of them holds, I mean, it's not supposed to hold a lot of paint, but it holds paint well, even if it's just a tiny little bit. And this is really easy. This is a really nice dry brush. I like this a lot. Actually, I think I might like it than the makeup brushes that I have because I did buy a really cheap set of makeup brushes. Check that out. That's just the first pass. And didn't put too much down on there. I mean, I removed 99% of the paint and it looks great. I really like this so far. I think we're gonna have another 10 out of 10 brush. Oh, but I think I found the problem. I am having a lot of bristles fall out and break, which that is bad. I do not like that. Especially because I don't want any of these bristles to be stuck on the base. So let me finish dry brushing and we'll inspect the brush at the end and see what the damage is. Okay, so let's take a look at these bristles now. I did have a decent amount of breakages. If you can see here, they broke all the way down here. This one broke there. These on the sides broke. I have one that's really long. So I did have a lot of breaks while dry brushing, which I was not too happy about because I was afraid that the bristles were going to get into what I was painting. And if they stick on there, we're going to get unnecessary texture. I don't know if that's common for dry brushes because I've only owned one other dry brush. Like I said, everything else that I use for dry brushing are makeup brushes, and the bristles tend to stay. But on the other end, this was an awesome brush. It did an amazing job as a dry brush, and in the end, it did what it was supposed to do in a great way. It transferred paint excellently, and I actually love it. I really like it. So since it worked so well, but had those breaks, I'm gonna have to give it a 4 out of 5 stars. I do recommend picking one up if you need a dry brush because I think it is cheaper than the Citadel dry brushes, but at the same time, expect for some of the bristles to break. I'd like to give a huge shout out to my patrons Leandris and Che Phillip. And I know you've heard it a ton of times already, but it's your support that keeps these videos coming each week. And if you'd also like to help support the channel, get your hands on a dry paint pot sticker, get these videos early each week, and all the other goodies that come along with being a patron, I'll drop the link to my Patreon below. And if you'd like to just hang out and talk about the hobby, I'll also drop a link to my Discord down low too. So let's check out this week's viewer submissions. And the mystery gang is almost all done. This post is by Che Gavesa, and I am so happy that these are almost done. I'm so freaking excited. I've been watching him work on these since day one, and every time a new model is done, oh, it's so good. It's so good to see them all together. His use of contrast paint is fantastic, and it really makes me want to go ahead and grab some because this work looks really good. Now, I do wonder what's being used on the bases because I like all that texture, and I wonder if they're done. Just curious, so be sure to let me know either in the comments below or drop it on Discord. And these bases, talking about bases again, are by CCrazy420, and they're turning out really great. Just looking at them quickly, I love the demon skull that you have over there in the back on that base, and also I absolutely love these sticks that are all tied together, and then there's like that one big, it looks like a broken trunk of a tree with the skull at the top. That's just fantastic. And I believe you're gonna do these with that water effects paint that you recently got. And if that's true, I'm seriously looking forward to seeing these done. Now just peeking in the back, I see all those other bases that you're working on the same kind of way. And I am so happy that you're gonna base your army with the same theme. There is nothing worse than having a great looking army that's just looks like they're all over the place. They're all mixed matched. So awesome job there. Now this post is by Wargaming Dude, and I wanted you all to see his work. Check this out. He watched the tutorial on how to paint miniatures that I made a few weeks back, and look at these pictures that he took. They're absolutely fantastic. And I'm just so freaking happy that it worked out because there's nothing better than putting so much time and effort into a model and actually being able to show it off properly. So awesome work, and I look forward to seeing more pictures like this. Now be sure to share any of your work with me both on Instagram and Facebook at The Dry Paint Pot because I pick my favorites each week and I feature them in my upcoming videos. Now wash your brushes, clean your paint pots, and keep on painting.